Well, something I did want to tell you is I'm really honored to be able to be, I'm usually with the kids, and it's nice to be out here with adults. And really, really, really awesome to be involved in your recovery. This is we're at Made for More tonight. If you are joining us on one of our live stream venues, and Made for More is a healing and recovery program on Thursday nights from 6 to 8. There's a meal provided, there's childcare provided, and it's for any kind of past pain or pattern. We all are continually working through things that tend to weigh us down or hold us back. And recovery is it's a process. It's about progress, not perfection, right? So I was asked just last night to share today, and so I consulted my own One Day at a Time recovery book, and as I read it's this really brief little devotional, I thought I would talk about that a little bit, and it was interesting, but I wanted to talk more about it than what was in the devotional. So before I read it, I invite everyone to ask yourself, how easily offended am I? And maybe if you've been in recovery for any amount of time, has that changed at all during the time that I have spent in recovery? So this is from August 27th from One Day at a Time. And it says, an interesting exercise and one well worth a few moments of reflection would be to consider the exact meaning of the phrase, to take offense. These words describe an act of willingly taking into ourselves a hurt we feel somebody intended to inflict on us. We take offense. It says we don't have to take it. And you're free to agree or disagree, as always, too. It says we are free to refuse to be hurt by a spiteful remark or a malicious action. So the whole matter really rests with us. The choice of accepting or rejecting an offense is ours alone. Today's reminder, it may not be easy at first, but if I keep reminding myself that I will not permit myself to be hurt by what someone says or does, it can bring about an amazing change in my attitude and disposition. Whenever I feel I am being hurt by someone, I will silently refuse to take offense or take any action to retaliate. What a relief it will be to have such incidents vanish into thin air, leaving not a mark on me. I will not accept offense. What can words do to me unless I take them to heart? And I don't know about you, but I read that and I was like, yes and no. Do you feel that way at all? The reading asks us to think about this phrase, to take offense. And I've heard that phrase several times, but I don't know that I've ever really stopped to think about that verb in there, to take it, to take offense. So really, the reading is telling us that when someone says something malicious, inconsiderate, critical, spiteful, hurtful, there are actually two separate things happening. There is what that other person has said or done, and that's one ball of wax, right? Like, included in that is what they might have meant by it, what motivated them to say that, what their intentions were, all of those things, what, their situation in life, or the relationship history we had, all that, and that one, what they are saying or doing. And another part of that is what actually is happening inside of me, right? And that's a whole ball of wax too. Just like, after it's, travels through the airwaves, then it's like, okay, now how did I receive that? How did I interpret that? What intentions did I assign or believe were happening? How was my day so far? What kind of state am I in? What is that topic? Just a whole bunch of things. So there's what's said, and that whole side of things, and then there's how I'm receiving them. And those aren't necessarily the same thing. And we can't control when someone says something like that. But recovery keeps bringing us back to this question, what part of this belongs to me? And this idea seems to be deeply connected to the first step, that idea where we admit we're powerless over our struggles, or whether that's alcohol or somebody else or a situation, a pain. And eventually many of us discover just how many things we are powerless over, right? I am powerless over another person's words. I'm powerless over another person's opinion of me. I'm powerless over whether someone understands why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm powerless over whether someone acknowledges what they did or how it hurt me. I'm powerless over whether someone apologizes. And I'm definitely powerless over whether someone behaves the way I think like a reasonable, healthy, mature person should behave. But I am not powerless over my own feelings, how I experience them, and what I do next. So that's where I think this reading becomes a little bit of a healthy challenge. And I feel a certain way. I name the feeling. I sit with it. I experience it. I understand it will pass because that's the nature of feelings. They pass. They're temporary. And I can get curious about that feeling and allow it to teach me more about that other person, the situation, the relationship, more about myself. But sometimes I don't do any of that. Instead, I take an offense and I carry it around. Does that make sense? I pick it up and carry it. I replay the conversation. I construct the response I wish I had given. I get mad at myself for how I may have failed to respond. I tell someone else what happened. This is part of taking that offense. I tell then another person, right? I imagine what that offender, whatever they said, what they must have meant by that. I mentally prosecute the case, right? I gather evidence. I explain to myself and these other people I vent to, why I was right. And sometimes, even though that original remark lasted 15 seconds, I end up giving it like hours of my life. Have you ever done that? Yeah. At that point, the other person may not even be doing anything anymore. I am doing it to myself, right? And I think that's where this idea of taking that offense becomes useful in our recovery. It reminds me there's a moment when something outside of me crosses a boundary into something that I begin to carry around inside of me. But I also want to be careful with this idea. And this is why that reading, I think, kind of was a little bit like, but I want to raise my hand and be like, but, okay, wait. Because recovery does not ask us to pretend that hurtful things don't hurt. And I don't think that don't take offense ever means tolerating abuse or accepting mistreatment or refusing to establish appropriate boundaries. Detachment isn't denial. A very healthy response is, that is not acceptable to me. That's something that it's good to get used to incorporating into our vocabulary. Okay, I can identify that. That is not acceptable to me. So sometimes recovery means leaving the room, ending or postponing the conversation. Have you ever done that? Changing the relationship even, or establishing a very firm boundary. When you speak to me in these ways, I'm not going to continue in this conversation. But there's a difference between setting a boundary, and this is what I want you to, if you're taking notes, this is something, there's a difference between setting a boundary and maintaining or carrying a resentment. And I think the difference is a boundary focuses on myself, which is a good thing to focus on. We can make good progress when we're focusing on ourselves. So a boundary says, given who this person is and how they are behaving, what do I need to do to take care of myself? But a resentment keeps my attention focused on the other person. Why'd you do that? Can't you see how wrong this is? Why can't you understand? Why can't you just be different? Why, you, right? It focuses on someone else. A boundary accepts reality, even when I don't like reality. And it says, okay, this is maybe who that person is right now. This might be what they are capable of right now. I can't change that. So what choices do I have? But resentment keeps arguing with reality. It says, you shouldn't be this way. You shouldn't have done that. You should have known better. You should understand me better. You should be different. You. And I can spend an enormous amount of emotional energy asking why another person isn't different. You ever do that? Man. Why aren't they more considerate? Why don't they appreciate me or what I've done? Why can't they see how their behavior is affecting everyone? Why don't they apologize? Why do they keep doing this, even though we've gone through this so many times? And those questions are completely legitimate questions. However, they might also be questions that don't ultimately lead me to serenity because they don't always have answers. But recovery turns those questions around. Instead of endlessly asking, why are you like this? I can ask, knowing that this is how you are behaving, what do I need to do? And that's a very different question. The first set of questions keeps me emotionally tied to somebody else's behavior. But the other one returns me to the only life that I have any real power over, which is my own. So perhaps a boundary says, I don't have to change you in order to decide what I'm going to participate in. And releasing resentment says, I'm going to stop demanding an explanation from reality for why you aren't the person I wish you were, or acting like I wish you would. And that distinction is really helpful to me. I think that's where we could also think about steps 4 and 10 can come into this picture too, because when I find myself offended, instead of immediately asking, why aren't they better? Why did they do this? What's wrong with that person? I can pause and take my own inventory. That's a step 4 kind of mentality. Not because the other person is necessarily right, and not because everything's always my fault, but because understanding myself better is always going to pay the biggest dividends for my own recovery. So I can ask myself, what exactly am I feeling right now? Because I think sometimes I'm offended is actually a cover-up, like a covering word for something that's more vulnerable. Do you guys remember when we talked about the feelings wheel? This is really helpful. Even psychology says when we name a feeling, when we give it a word, when we give it a name, things start to change, our healing, our recovery starts to accelerate. So this is important. That feelings wheel is really important. So instead of I'm offended, what kind of feelings might there be? Can anybody think of actual feelings words? Hurt? Upset? Misunderstood? Yeah. Betrayed? Those are all so good. I mean, angry.
I was going to say, angry, hateful.
Yeah. Hateful. Frustrated. Disappointed. That's a good one. Threatened. When somebody, sometimes our reaction is like, oh, I actually feel kind of threatened by what you just said or how you're doing, what you're doing. What'd you say? Scared, yeah, sure. How about unappreciated or disrespected? Those are also feeling words. Rejected. Is embarrassed ever part of that, a feeling that when someone says something? So after I say, okay, what exactly am I feeling? Then I can ask, why is this particular thing getting to me so much? Have you ever noticed that about yourself? Okay, I'm really reactive right now to whatever was just said. And it's okay not to judge yourself, but to just notice. and be curious. Wonder why. Why did that cause such a big feeling in me of whatever it was, right? What's going on inside of me? Maybe it's because somebody criticized something I'm already insecure about. Has that ever happened to you? When people make snide remarks sometimes about me being late, sometimes I get those feelings because I'm a little insecure about my punctuality sometimes anyway, right? So their comment didn't create that insecurity, but it landed directly on something that was already there. And that's a me issue, right? Partly. And I need to be aware and understand me. Maybe I desperately wanted that particular person's approval. Is that ever something like, if anybody else had said this, it would have landed differently because that person said it? I'm asking myself, I'm curious, why? And maybe I need to realize, and then maybe I need to ask, why do I seek that person's approval so much? What can I learn about myself? And maybe why have I given that particular person so much authority over how I feel about myself? Because that tells us something about ourselves too. And maybe we want to change that about ourselves. Maybe I have an expectation that this person should have understood me. What do we say about expectations? Sometimes they're nothing more than a premeditated resentment. And that's something else that I need to be aware of in my own self. Do I want to continue carrying around expectations of others like this? And I want to be curious about that and think about if there's something I want to change about that. Maybe the pain isn't only in what they said, it's that expectation beneath it. And maybe I need to ask whether I can allow another person not to understand me and still be okay. Maybe I want to control how other people see me. If somebody says something and other people overhear it, is that ever a part of it? You're doing image control in your mind. I don't know. But maybe my explanation is completely reasonable, but why do I need that person to agree with my explanation? Can I know my own motives and who I am and why I do things without trying to convince everybody else about them? The more I grow in recovery, the less I feel a need to defend or explain myself. I remember a time not too long ago that that was a big deal. I wanted so desperately for people to believe authentic things about me. And I don't know, the more I grow in recovery, I think, you know what? Bless you. You may think what you will. I'm okay, and I'm moving on, right? Do I actually have to correct this today? And maybe I can clarify myself once, and maybe I need to say nothing at all. And maybe this person is simply going to believe something about me that simply isn't true, and convince others about that. So I ask myself, and I invite you to ask yourself, can I tolerate being misunderstood? Can I let another person be wrong about me? And finally, another element to this is maybe I'm afraid that what they said contains a grain of truth. Sometimes when we react big, it's because maybe there's some truth in it. And maybe their behavior is 100% inappropriate, and what I need isn't reflection about me, but a detachment and a boundary, and that's definitely a possibility. But maybe, just maybe, I can ask myself another useful question, even if I don't like what they said or how they delivered it or any of that, or them. I don't even maybe like them. But I can still ask myself, is there useful information here for me today? Maybe what they said is unfair. Maybe they're saying it maliciously. Maybe 90% of what they said is really their own projection or anger or nonsense, just nonsense. But Recovery can give us enough security to ask, is there 10% here that I needed to hear? Does it have anything to do with me? How does it reflect within me? Because if there is, here's the deal. Sometimes we're all or nothing people, but we don't have to be. I don't have to swallow the other 90% of what they said and how they said it or the harm in order to learn from that 10%. Does that make sense? It's like they say with fish, you can eat the meat and throw away the bones. I don't have to choose between either they're completely right and I'm terrible, or they're completely wrong and I have nothing to learn from them. I can say, let me see whether there is anything here that belongs to me. And if there is, I can own it. If I owe an apology, I can apologize. If I need to change something, I can change it. If I've been dishonest with myself, I can admit it. And then I can let the rest belong to the other person. That's what detachment is to me. And so there are 4 questions that I would encourage us when we realize we notice ourselves taking offense. And this is something, if you're taking notes, that you know aren't done. So there's 4 questions that I think that it could be helpful for us. First, and if you're a journaler, maybe you journal, what happened? And this is where it's just the facts, no commentary, just what was actually said or done, without adding motives that I can't know. And then second, what happened inside of me? And I think this is the most important question. If we are wanting to learn and grow and heal within ourselves, we want to know what is happening inside of me. What am I feeling? That's where we get that feelings wheel out. Name the feeling. And what did this touch inside of me? And then third, what is mine? Is there something that I need to own, that I want to change, something that I need to accept, something that I need to apologize for, something that I need to let go of, or something that I need to understand better about myself? And then fourth, what isn't mine? What belongs to that other person's choices, to their personality, to their illness, to their expectations, to their mood, to their behavior? And I can leave that with them. And I might even add a 5th question. What would serenity look like here and now? Not what does victory look like, winning the argument, not what does proving my point look like, not what does it look like to get someone to understand, but what would serenity look like for me here now? And maybe serenity means speaking up, maybe it means making amends, maybe it means saying no, maybe it means letting go, maybe it means calling my sponsor. Maybe it means praying for that person. And sometimes serenity may just mean to decide, I'm not going to carry this. I'm not going to take offense and carry it. And that brings us to step 11, because sometimes I've done all the inventory I can do and I'm still angry, or I'm still reactive, or I'm still whatever fill in the blank feeling word, frustrated, disappointed. And that's where prayer and meditation and continuing our conscious contact with God becomes really practical and not as much theoretical. So I can say, continue the prayer of God, show me what is mine here. Help me to own it honestly. Show me what is not mine. Help me to release it. God, give me the gift of serenity. Because ultimately, I don't think refusing to take offense means becoming a person who can't be hurt. You're not a robot. None of us are robots. We're human. But I can feel something without feeding it. I can acknowledge someone's behavior without letting it define me. I can establish boundaries without hatred. I can learn from criticism without surrendering my self-worth to it. And then again, like we said, other people, one of the gifts of recovery is just other people are allowed to be wrong about me today. I don't have to chase down every misunderstanding. I don't have to correct every opinion. I don't have to accept every invitation into an argument. I don't have to pick up everything someone throws at me. I don't have to take it, right? maybe that's what it means little by little to stop taking offense. Not because nothing hurts anymore, but because recovery teaches me to ask those 4 questions. What happened? What's happening inside of me? What is mine? What isn't mine? And maybe the 5th question of what does serenity look like in this situation? So that's all I got for you this evening before you take a little break and head into small groups.